My daughter-in-law, Rachel, stood up at our family dinner. She raised her champagne glass, the ice clinking with that dry, cold sound that only ostentatious luxury makes. "A toast," she announced to the table, her smug smile directed at all the guests who were eating the food I had prepared and enjoying the atmosphere I had curated. "A toast to Dorothy, a woman who, unlike us, knows how to live comfortably on her modest pension." The whole table laughed, a chorus of sounds that betrayed their hunger for attention and gossip. My son, Michael, smiled nervously, as he always did when Rachel was in performance mode. His work colleagues, the neighbors, even my sister Janet, they all seemed to be enjoying themselves at the expense of poor old Dorothy, who scraped by on her pension. What they didn't know, while they filled their mouths with my truffle roast and sipped my 98 Bordeaux, was that dinner was taking place in a restaurant I owned, and the woman they were celebrating for her success was stealing a salary from my subsidiary. I reached for my vintage Louis Vuitton bag. I pulled out a piece of paper, though it wasn't my standard business card, and slid it across the polished mahogany table, right in front of Rachel. "By the way, Rachel," I said sweetly, raising my voice so that my firm and measured tone cut through the chatter, "I'm looking for a new head of sales for one of my divisions. You're fired, and you were fired by me." The silence that followed was so thick you could have cut it with a knife. Glasses remained suspended in midair, forks stopped halfway to mouths. Rachel stared at me as if I had just announced I was an alien. "If you're watching me right now, stop, subscribe immediately, and let me know where you're following me from. This, trust me, is a story that will make you understand why sometimes keeping your mouth shut about your successes is the best business strategy that exists." Now, let me step back and explain how we got to that moment of perfect justice. My name is Dorothy Blackwood. I'm 73 years old and live in the quiet town of Millbrook, Connecticut. And until a few hours before the explosive dinner, most people, including my ambitious daughter-in-law Rachel, thought I was just another lonely widow living on her pension. They thought I spent my time knitting, volunteering at the local community center, and growing roses in my little backyard garden. The reality is that for 40 years I've run Blackwood Strategic Solutions, a small, efficient, and extremely profitable consulting firm. We weren't as big as McKinsey or Boston Consulting Group, but we were smart, agile, and knew how to maximize every dollar invested. We've helped over 200 companies increase their profits, streamline operations, and tackle complex global market challenges. But I never made a big deal about it with the family. Why this secrecy? Simple. I had learned long ago that when people discover you have real money, everything changes. Conversations become forced, relationships get complicated, and suddenly everyone has an entrepreneurial project to propose to you. I wanted my family relationships to be authentic, not contaminated by the prospect of an inheritance. It all started 5 years ago when my son Michael met Rachel at a marketing conference in Boston. Rachel was fresh out of Harvard Business School with an MBA that cost $200,000 and ambition that could power a small country. She had that kind of ruthless confidence that comes from always getting what she wanted, and Michael was completely bewitched. "Mom, you'll love Rachel," Michael told me during our first phone call after meeting her. "She has an incredible business sense. She just became the #1 salesperson in her division, and she's only 28. She's destined for great things." The first time I met her, she arrived at my modest suburban home, a 2-story cottage I had deliberately chosen to appear ordinary, wearing an Armani suit that seemed to cost more than my car, a 2015 Toyota Camry I drove specifically to maintain appearances. She constantly checked her iPhone, responding to emails even during conversation. She was polite, certainly, but that politeness had a condescending undertone I recognized well from the business world. It was the kind of courtesy reserved for people you consider irrelevant, but still have to tolerate out of politeness. I caught her rolling her eyes when Michael mentioned that I volunteered at the Millbrook Community Center, helping seniors with their tax returns and organizing fundraising events. "That's sweet," Rachel commented with a smile that never reached her eyes. Everyone needs hobbies to fill their time. That phrase, "everyone needs hobbies to fill their time," became my warning signal. It meant she considered me one of those lonely widows who invent activities to feel useful, an elderly woman who had nothing truly important to do with her life except fill her empty days with small good deeds. Rachel was convinced that real life, real power, was found only in multi-million-dollar contracts, PowerPoint presentations, and boardrooms with Manhattan views, not in community center chatter or conversations about tomato prices at the local market. During that first visit, I noticed how Rachel examined my house with an appraiser's eyes. She looked at the furniture, deliberately modest, the paintings on the walls, reproductions, not originals, the television, a 5-year-old model. She was cataloging everything, probably calculating the value of Michael's future inheritance. What she didn't know was that my real home, an 8,000-square-foot villa on 20 acres in Connecticut, was registered under the name of one of my holding companies. That little house was just my costume for family occasions. The evolution of the relationship and early signs. 2 years after their first meeting, Rachel landed what she called her dream job, head of sales at Hartwell Industries, a medium-sized consulting firm based in Stamford. Her enthusiasm was contagious, but also revealing. Finally, she told me during one of our monthly dinners, cutting her salmon with precise, theatrical movements, "I work for a company that understands the value of innovation." Hartwell Industries isn't one of those dusty old firms that do things like they did in the 80s. We're cutting edge. We use artificial intelligence, big data analysis, everything needed to compete in the modern market. She couldn't stop bragging. Every single family conversation included detailed updates on her commission checks, which grew every month, her new office with a view of Long Island Sound, her plans to completely transform the company's entire sales strategy. The problem with most consulting firms, she declared with the authority of someone who had read too many Harvard Business Review articles, is that they're run by people who don't understand the contemporary market. They use antiquated strategies, rely on personal relationships instead of concrete data, and don't know how to scale their services. Michael nodded admiringly. Rachel has already increased her department's sales by 40% in 6 months, he informed me proudly. The CEO has already offered her a promotion. "I'm going to transform that place," Rachel declared at one of our monthly dinners, gesticulating with her fork as if she were conducting an orchestra. "Their current sales approach is completely outdated. I'll probably be running the entire commercial division within 2 years, and the entire company within 5. That's when I realized exactly which company she was talking about. Hartwell Industries. The name sounded familiar, and when I got home that evening, I checked my files. Hartwell Industries wasn't just any consulting firm. It was one of my biggest competitors in the New England region. We had competed for several contracts over the past few years, and they had won some bids I thought were in our pocket. With Rachel as head of sales, the game was officially on, even though she didn't know she was playing against me. The interesting thing was that Rachel seemed genuinely convinced that Hartwell was superior to all other consulting firms in the area. "We have technology that other companies haven't even imagined," she told me once. "Integrated CRM systems, predictive analytics, marketing automation. The old consulting firms that still do everything by hand are destined for extinction." I smiled and nodded, pretending to be impressed by her technological expertise. What she didn't know was that Blackwood Strategic had implemented all those systems 3 years earlier, and we had also developed some proprietary tools that were even more advanced. Point 1. The scent of betrayal and the wrong advantage. In the months following her appointment as head of sales, Rachel began filling herself with increasingly spectacular triumphs. Every family dinner became a bragging session about her commercial successes. "I closed the Henderson contract last week," she announced at dinner, cutting her Wagyu steak with almost surgical precision. It was the biggest sale in company history. $3 million over 5 years. Everyone said Henderson would never change suppliers after 15 years with the same consulting firm, but I did it. Michael smiled, completely ecstatic about his wife. "Tell Mom how you did it," he encouraged her. Rachel leaned back in her chair, savoring the attention. It was a matter of really understanding their needs, she explained with the air of someone revealing state commercial secrets. Their previous consulting firm, a small local operation called something like Blackwood, wasn't providing the kind of sophisticated analysis Henderson needed. We were able to demonstrate that we could offer better results at a more competitive price. My heart almost stopped. The Henderson contract. My team had worked on that client for 3 years, slowly building a relationship of trust, identifying their specific needs, developing a personalized strategy for their expansion goals. Hartwell Industries had swooped in at the last minute with an aggressive offer and stolen the contract. But what struck me most was the ease with which Rachel dismissed Blackwood Strategic as a small local operation. She was literally talking about my company as if it were a country store. "That's wonderful, dear," I said, maintaining a neutral tone and refilling my water glass with perfectly steady hands. "Competition keeps everyone active and innovative." Rachel's smile cracked slightly. She expected me to be more enthusiastic, to ask her detailed questions about her business genius, to beg her to explain how the modern business world worked. Instead, I had treated it like a weather comment. "Aren't you curious to know how I did it?" she insisted. It was a very sophisticated strategy. "I'm sure it was," I replied with a sweet smile. Success in business always requires a lot of preparation and a bit of luck. The word luck made her stiffen. Rachel hated any suggestion that her successes were due to anything other than her pure ability. But inside, I was keeping a very precise count. The Henderson contract was just the beginning. In the following months, 3 other important clients left my company for Hartwell. The pattern was always the same. Rachel approached them with incredibly detailed information about their internal operations, their specific challenges, their growth plans. Information that could only come from someone who had access to our internal files or who had had very in-depth conversations with people who knew these clients intimately. The problem was that I had never discussed these specific details with anyone outside my company. The particular challenges of the Morrison client, for example, or the Williams Company's international expansion plans, these were pieces of information I had shared only with my senior consulting team. This meant one of 2 things. Either Rachel had suddenly become the most gifted commercial detective in New England, or she was getting help from someone who had direct access to my confidential information. "Mom, you should really ask Rachel for advice on your community center projects," Michael suggested to me one evening while we were washing dishes after dinner. "She really knows how modern business works. Maybe she could help you modernize some of your volunteer activities." Rachel laughed, and the sound was exactly like ice cubes clinking in a crystal glass. "Michael, your mother's projects are absolutely adorable, but they're not exactly high-stakes business. I deal with million-dollar contracts, complex negotiations with Fortune 500 CEOs, market strategies involving big data analysis. It's a completely different world from community center fundraising." That condescension, combined with the systematic theft of my clients, gave me the moral green light I needed. It was time to investigate seriously. I called my lawyer, Thomas Richardson, a brilliant man who had handled my legal affairs for 20 years. The initial investigation and first discoveries. "Thomas," I said during our meeting in his Manhattan office, "I need you to conduct a discreet investigation into Hartwell Industries. I want to know exactly how they're winning contracts that should be ours. Thomas, a 55-year-old man with gray hair and 20 years of experience in corporate law, took meticulous notes. Do you suspect industrial espionage? I suspect something, I replied. But I need concrete evidence before making any moves. Thomas's investigation was discreet but thorough. He hired a private investigator, analyzed Hartwell's public documents, and used his contacts in the industry to gather information about their business practices. The report arrived 3 weeks later and confirmed my worst suspicions. Every major client stolen by Hartwell was someone I had had detailed preliminary discussions with. Somehow, Hartwell was getting precise information about my strategies, my prices, and most worryingly about my client-specific and confidential needs. The pattern is too consistent to be a coincidence, Thomas concluded. Someone within your organization is passing information to Hartwell, or someone with access to your private conversations is acting as an informant. But then Thomas told me something that made me reflect deeply. Dorothy, there's something else. I discovered that many of these contracts that Hartwell has stolen have turned out to be much less profitable than they initially seemed. The Henderson contract, for example, is causing big problems. Henderson is dissatisfied with the service and is threatening early termination. This information made me pause. Reviewing the contracts I had lost, I realized something interesting. Many of those were contracts that, after deeper analysis, I had decided not to pursue aggressively. They were too small for the time required, too complicated to be profitable, or presented too many red flags regarding the client's ability to pay. In other words, Rachel and Hartwell were winning contracts that I had secretly decided I didn't really want. It was as if I was involuntarily using these problematic contracts as bait, while concentrating my real efforts on clients I knew would be profitable and stable. Rachel thought she was a business genius, but she was actually helping me eliminate problematic clients from my pipeline. Hartwell Industries was taking all the headaches and difficult accounts, while Blackwood Strategic maintained the premium clients who paid well and didn't cause problems. It would have been a brilliant strategy, if only I had planned it consciously from the beginning. But there was still the question of how Rachel was getting the information. And that answer came unexpectedly. The discovery of family betrayal. The breakthrough came during Thanksgiving. The whole family gathered at Michael and Rachel's house for the traditional dinner. It was an elegant event. Rachel never did anything halfway, with a $30 per pound organic turkey, French wine, and China service that probably cost more than my Toyota. During dinner, Rachel began one of her usual bragging sessions. I just closed another major contract, she announced, raising her glass of Bordeaux. The Pemberton Company. 3 years, $2.5 million. Their previous consultant, still that small local company, Blackwood, couldn't understand their technological modernization needs. Pemberton. My stomach contracted. I had never publicly discussed the Pemberton client with anyone. Their technological modernization needs were something I had discovered during a confidential conversation with their CEO, Robert Pemberton, only 6 weeks earlier. Interesting, I said, keeping my voice neutral. How did you learn about their specific needs? Rachel smiled with superiority. Thorough research, Dorothy. That's what we professionals do. We don't just wait for clients to call us. We go out there and discover what they need before they even know it themselves. But then she added something that chilled my blood. For example, I learned that Pemberton was having problems with their inventory management system. Their current software can't handle the expansion they're planning for 2025. Information like this gives you a huge advantage in negotiations. The specific problems with Pemberton's inventory system were something Robert had confided to me during a private conversation in my office. It wasn't public information. It wasn't something you could discover through thorough research. The only way Rachel could know these details was if someone who was present at that conversation had told her. After dinner, while Rachel was in the kitchen preparing coffee, I approached Michael. Son, can I ask you a question? Has Rachel ever asked you about my volunteer work? Michael seemed confused by the question. What do you mean? Well, has she ever shown curiosity about the people I work with at the community center? Their problems, their situations? Now that I think about it, Michael said slowly, yes. She's asked me several questions about what you do there. She says she's interested in volunteering and that maybe someday she could join you. My heart sank. What kind of questions? Oh, things like, who are the people you help? What kind of problems they have, if any of them own businesses? She said she was curious to better understand the local community. Everything clicked into place. Rachel wasn't interested in volunteering. She was interested in the information I might inadvertently share during casual family conversations. During our lunches and dinners, when I talked about my volunteer activities, I was actually sharing details about my clients without realizing it. When I mentioned that Mr. Pemberton from the community center was having problems with his company's computers, Rachel was cataloging this information for commercial use. She had transformed our family moments into commercial intelligence sessions. The escalation and aggressive move. Things became criminal the Tuesday after Thanksgiving. Thomas called me with a voice that could barely contain professional anger. Dorothy, you need to come to my office immediately. Someone is making very aggressive moves against your company. I arrived at his Park Avenue office an hour later. Thomas handed me a thick legal document, a formal letter of intent from Hartwell Industries proposing to acquire Blackwood Strategic Solutions. They want to buy your company, Thomas explained, and the offer is insultingly low. They're offering $2.3 million for a company worth at least $15 million. But the most shocking part wasn't the ridiculous price. It was the fact that the proposal included detailed information about my company that they should never have had. Specific client names, exact contract values, even my monthly overhead expenses, and employee salaries. How the hell did they get this information? I asked, flipping through the documents. Someone with complete access to your internal files is feeding Hartwell commercial intelligence, Thomas replied. This is a serious breach of corporate confidentiality and potentially industrial espionage. The letter was signed by James Hartwell, CEO of Hartwell Industries, but included a personal note that said, "We have been informed by a reliable source that you might be interested in retirement. This acquisition would allow you to enjoy your golden years without the stress of business management." A reliable source who knew I was considering retirement. The only person I had ever casually mentioned the possibility of slowing down work to was Rachel during an after-dinner conversation 2 months earlier. Thomas, I said, feeling a cold calm descend upon me, I need you to conduct a thorough investigation. I want to know if there's any financial connection between Hartwell Industries and someone in my family. Do you suspect Rachel? Thomas asked directly. I suspect that my daughter-in-law is selling information about my company to my competitors, I replied. And I need concrete evidence. Thomas's investigation was meticulous and discreet. He used contacts in the banking sector, analyzed public documents, and traced money flows between various entities. The final report arrived Friday afternoon and confirmed my worst suspicions. Rachel Wilson, that was her maiden name, had been receiving regular payments from Hartwell Industries for consulting services for the past 8 months. The payments were substantial, $15,000 per month, plus bonuses based on market information provided. She's been working as their business intelligence consultant, Thomas explained, showing me the banking documents. Officially, it's all legal. But the timing of these payments corresponds exactly to Hartwell's winning bids on contracts that should have gone to your company. Rachel had systematically betrayed my family trust, converting our intimate conversations into commercial intelligence, while playing the part of the devoted daughter-in-law and business expert at our monthly dinners. But Rachel had made a fatal error in her calculation. She had taken for granted that I was exactly what I seemed, a 73-year-old widow with a small consulting business that had achieved modest success. She had never imagined the true scope of my operation or the resources I had at my disposal. "Thomas," I said, smiling for the first time in weeks, "it's time to prepare a business lesson for Rachel. And I need you to prepare some very special documents." Preparing for the reckoning. What Rachel didn't know, what no one in my family knew, was that Blackwood Strategic Solutions was just the tip of the iceberg of my commercial empire. Over the past 25 years, I had built a network of 6 interconnected companies in 3 states. Besides the consulting firm, I owned a software company that developed proprietary solutions for business analysis, an investment company that managed portfolios for high-net-worth clients, and, this was the piece de resistance, a controlling 67% stake in Hartwell Industries itself. I had acquired Hartwell 3 years earlier, when they were going through financial difficulties. The acquisition had been handled through one of my holding companies, keeping my identity completely hidden. I had allowed the existing management to continue operating independently while injecting the capital necessary for their expansion. In other words, Rachel was stealing information from my company to help another of my companies win contracts. She was betraying her mother-in-law to impress the boss, without realizing that her mother-in-law was the boss. Rachel's success, her bonuses, even her office with a view, everything had been financed by my investment capital. The irony is exquisite, I told Thomas as we planned my strategy. Rachel thinks she's a business genius who has outsmarted poor old Dorothy. In reality, she's been a pawn in a much bigger game than she can imagine. But there was another dimension to the problem I had to address: my relationship with Michael. My son was completely unaware of his wife's criminal activities, and I suspected the revelation would devastate him. I decided to handle the situation in a way that would protect Michael as much as possible, while ensuring that Rachel faced the full consequences of her actions. The grand anniversary revelation. The invitation to Michael and Rachel's 5th anniversary dinner arrived on ivory embossed paper with gold calligraphy lettering. The event was scheduled for a Saturday evening in their luxury Stamford apartment, a 4,000-square-foot place with a view of Long Island Sound that they could afford thanks to Rachel's successes. "I've invited everyone who matters in Connecticut's business world," Rachel told me a week before, with the excitement of a child organizing a birthday party. "There will be Hartwell's senior partners, the mayor of Stamford, the president of the Chamber of Commerce, and several CEOs from the area's most important companies." It was clear that Rachel saw this event not only as a celebration of their marriage, but as a networking opportunity that could further advance her career. "It's about strategic networking as much as celebrating," she explained to me. "At events like these, you make the contacts that can change your professional life." The evening of the event, I arrived dressed in my usual modest style, a navy blue Talbot's dress, comfortable shoes, and my vintage Louis Vuitton bag, the only sign of luxury I allowed myself on family occasions. The apartment had been transformed into a showroom of elegance, fresh flowers costing $500 per arrangement, catering service serving Kumamoto oysters and Dom Perignon champagne, and a string quartet playing in the background. Rachel worked the room like a politician on the campaign trail, moving from group to group with the grace of someone who knows exactly what impression she wants to make. She wore a black Chanel dress that probably cost $8,000 and jewelry that sparkled under the chandelier lights. During the cocktail hour, I met several interesting people, including Jim Henderson, the client Rachel had stolen from my company. Jim seemed visibly uncomfortable when he recognized me. "Mrs. Blackwood," he said, lowering his voice, "I hope there are no hard feelings about the contract. You know how business goes. Sometimes you have to take the best offer." "Of course," I replied with a genuine smile. "I hope Hartwell is meeting all your expectations." Jim's smile became strained. Well, there have been some challenges with implementation. More complicated than they initially led us to believe. Before I could respond, Rachel appeared at my side like a hawk swooping down. Jim, I hope you're enjoying the party. And Dorothy, I see you've met one of our most important clients. Jim was just saying how satisfied he is with Hartwell's service, I said innocently. Rachel's laugh was a bit too shrill. Jim is just a perfectionist. We'll resolve every little technical issue. It's normal to have some initial adjustments with projects of this scope. After Jim walked away looking even more uncomfortable, my curiosity intensified. Little technical issues was usually a euphemism for problems much bigger than what they wanted to publicly admit. Later, during the post-dinner reception, I found myself near the bar when I overheard a conversation between two senior Hartwell Industries partners. They hadn't noticed me, one of the blessings of being an elderly and apparently insignificant woman. How is the Henderson situation really developing? One asked in a low tone, checking that no one was listening. It's a complete disaster, replied the other, shaking his head. They're threatening to terminate the contract early and sue us for breach. Rachel promised results we simply can't deliver with their budget. The entire proposal was overestimated by at least 40%. It's the third problematic account this quarter, continued the first. The board of directors is starting to ask serious questions about Rachel's department sales practices. If we lose Henderson, we could be in trouble. They noticed me and quickly changed the subject, but I had heard enough. Rachel's record-breaking success was showing significant cracks. Her triumphs were built on overpromising and unrealistic expectations, not on a truly sustainable business strategy. As the party continued, Rachel approached me with what I recognized as her business smile, the one she used when she wanted something. Dorothy, she said, taking my arm and guiding me to a quieter corner. I was thinking, you've been running that little consulting business for so long, and I know how stressful it can be for someone your age. Maybe it's time to seriously consider retirement. Her tone was caring, almost maternal, but her eyes revealed something else. There was a cold determination I recognized from the business world. It was the same expression I had seen on the faces of competitors who were about to make an aggressive move. I could help you find someone to take over the business, she continued. I have some contacts who might be interested. You could probably get a good price, enough to live comfortably for the rest of your life. It was an apparently kind proposal, but I recognized the subtle aggression. Rachel was actively trying to eliminate me from the market to complete whatever plan she had in mind. Very thoughtful of you, I said, maintaining a neutral tone. I'll definitely think about it. But inside, I was smiling. It was time to show Rachel what happens when you underestimate the wrong opponent. The moment of truth. The dinner proceeded flawlessly. Rachel had orchestrated every detail to maximize impact. A 7-course menu prepared by a private chef, wine selected by a sommelier, and conversations carefully guided to showcase her commercial expertise. During the main course, herb-crusted lamb with red wine reduction, Rachel stood up to make her big announcement. Friends, she said, gently tapping her spoon against the crystal glass, Michael and I have incredibly exciting news to share. The room fell silent, all eyes on her. Rachel savored the moment, clearly enjoying the attention. Hartwell Industries is expanding significantly, she announced proudly. We're opening a new division focused on strategic acquisitions, and the board of directors has chosen me to lead it. Applause filled the room. Michael beamed, clearly proud of his wife. Tell them about the salary increase, he encouraged. $200,000 base salary, Rachel said, her eyes sparkling, plus performance bonuses that could easily double that figure. They say I have a natural talent for identifying undervalued companies and finding ways to acquire them profitably. I nodded with apparent approval. That sounds like a truly extraordinary opportunity. I'm curious. What's your first acquisition target? Rachel's eyes lit up like a child about to open a Christmas present. Well, I probably shouldn't reveal too many strategic details, but I can say we've identified a small local consulting firm that would be perfect for our expansion plans. She paused dramatically, clearly savoring what she thought would be my amazement. The owner is an elderly person, probably ready for retirement, and the company has some valuable client relationships we could leverage to our advantage. It's exactly the kind of acquisition that can transform a medium-sized company into a dominant regional player. Fascinating, I said, gently setting down my wine glass. Would I happen to know this company? Rachel smiled with what could only be described as malicious triumph. Blackwood Strategic Solutions, she said with obvious pride. They think they're competing with us, but they're really just a family operation with completely outdated methods. Once we acquire them, we can completely modernize their client base and easily triple the revenue. Michael looked confused between me and his wife. Wait, Rachel, isn't that the... Yes, I said calmly, reaching into my purse for the manila envelope I had brought specifically for this moment. That's exactly my company. The color completely drained from Rachel's face. For a moment, she looked like she was about to faint. You're what? She stammered. But that's impossible. You volunteer at the community center. You live on your pension. I pulled out the first document from the envelope, the complete corporate structure of Hartwell Industries, with my name highlighted in yellow as majority shareholder. I own 67% of Hartwell Industries, Rachel. I've owned this company for 3 years. Rachel stared at the document as if it were written in hieroglyphics, her mind clearly unable to process the reality unfolding before her eyes. And I also run Blackwood Strategic Solutions. I continued with a smile that didn't reach my eyes, a multi-million-dollar consulting firm. The same company you've been trying to systematically destroy while stealing a salary from my subsidiary. The silence in the room was so dense you could hear the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. All the guests stared at us, as if they were witnessing a car accident in slow motion. Michael looked back and forth between me and his wife, as if he were trapped in a soap opera episode. Mom, I don't understand. You never said you owned Hartwell Industries. You never said your consulting business was so big. It wasn't relevant to our family relationships until now, I replied simply. I pulled out the second document, the detailed financial records Thomas had obtained through his investigation. Rachel has systematically sold confidential information about Blackwood Strategic to Hartwell Industries for the past 8 months. Information she gathered during our private family conversations. Rachel's hands visibly trembled as she reached for her wine glass. Dorothy, you don't understand, she said, her voice now high and desperate. This was just legitimate business strategy. I was trying to help Hartwell succeed in the competitive market. By betraying your family's trust? I asked, my voice still calm, but with an undertone of steel. By stealing clients from the woman who paid for your wedding, who welcomed you into her family, who treated you like a daughter? Rachel's mask of professional competence had finally fallen completely, revealing the desperate ambition and fear lurking beneath the surface. What happens now? Michael asked in an almost whispered voice. I smiled and pulled out the third document from my envelope. Now Rachel learns a fundamental lesson about what happens when you try to steal from someone who really knows how to play the business game. I slid the termination letter across the table toward Rachel, making sure all the guests could see the official document. Your employment with Hartwell Industries is terminated effective immediately, I said with the same voice I had used to fire incompetent employees for the past 40 years. Your access to all company systems has been revoked, your corporate credit card has been canceled, and your final paycheck will be adjusted to reflect the restitution of compensation obtained through unauthorized disclosure of confidential information. Rachel's voice was barely a terrified whisper. You can't do this. I have an employment contract. I have legal rights. You have the right to legal representation, I interrupted with professional calm. I strongly suggest you use it. Thomas has prepared a complete file documenting your systematic breach of fiduciary duty. Industrial espionage is considered a very serious matter by both civil and criminal courts. Michael desperately tried to intervene. Mom, surely we can find a way to resolve this problem. Rachel made a mistake, but she's still family. We can't. I turned to look at my son with the expression I had perfected over decades of difficult negotiations. Michael, authentic family doesn't steal from family. Real family doesn't systematically lie, manipulate trust, and betray the people they love for personal gain. Rachel has deliberately undermined my business for months, using our family relationship as cover for criminal activities. But she didn't know Hartwell was your company, Michael protested weakly. She knew perfectly well she was stealing confidential information, I replied firmly. She knew she was betraying my personal and professional trust. The only thing she didn't know was that she was completely incompetent at doing it, and that she was playing a much more complex game than her mind could comprehend. Rachel suddenly perked up, fueled by desperation and anger. You think you've won, but you're completely wrong. I have contacts throughout the consulting industry. I know where all the corporate secrets are buried. I can destroy Hartwell Industries' reputation with a few strategic phone calls. The threat hung in the air like toxic smoke. Rachel was finally showing her true colors, pure, desperate ambition without moral scruples. I reached into my purse one last time and pulled out a legal document as thick as a book. Rachel, dear, here's your non-disclosure agreement. The one you enthusiastically signed when you started working for Hartwell. The one that specifically prohibits you from disparaging the company, revealing confidential information to competitors, or undertaking any action that could damage Hartwell's commercial reputation. Her face turned white as paper as she recognized her signature at the bottom of the document. Violation of this agreement carries an automatic penalty of $5 million in damages, I continued with the voice of someone who has read thousands of similar contracts. Plus all associated legal fees. Plus potential criminal charges for industrial espionage, extortion, and commercial defamation. So please, Rachel, go ahead and make those phone calls. I'd really love to see you try. Rachel slumped into her Italian designer chair, finally understanding the full scope of her miscalculation. She had thought she was playing checkers while I was playing three-dimensional chess. There's one last thing, I said, standing up from my chair and preparing to leave. Michael, I'm officially transferring my Hartwell Industries shares to you. Consider it an early inheritance and a practical business training opportunity. Michael was completely stunned. Mom, I know absolutely nothing about running a consulting firm. You'll learn quickly, and you'll have excellent teachers. Hartwell's current management team is very competent and professional. They just needed more careful oversight and clearer strategic direction. I looked at Rachel meaningfully, something they'll certainly have now. As I headed toward the door, with all the guests staring at me in stunned silence, Rachel called out to me in a pleading voice. Dorothy, wait please. We can surely fix things. I'll personally apologize to all the clients. I'll make full restitution of everything I earned. Don't completely destroy my career. I turned to look at her one last time, finally seeing the real person behind the professional mask. Rachel, I said with a voice that contained 40 years of business experience, your entire career has been built on systematic theft and deliberate deception. I'm not destroying anything. I'm simply removing the stolen and fraudulent foundations on which it was built. And with that, I left the party, leaving behind a silence I knew would last a very, very long time. Thank you for listening to this story of corporate justice. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. See you in the next episode.